This is the Rabbi and The Shrink. This is Dr. Margarita Gurri, the Shrink, and everyone's favorite rabbi.
Yonason Goldson.
And the rabbi and I are delighted to have with us Eliz Greene. Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here.
Hi, Liz.
We are delighted. You had an interesting conversation with the rabbi recently, and you got on our radar, and we just had to have you on. Eliz Greene is an odd combination of skills. She's funny as all get out. She's a serious stress researcher. She is an MC, whether it's in person, hybrid, or through remote means. Clearly a facilitator. She's an author of 4 books: Stress Proof Your Life, Stress Proof Your Heart, Busy Woman's Guide to a Healthy Heart, and Embrace Your Heart. She has won the Heart Hero Award for 2010, while most of us were wearing pajamas and hanging out in the early parts of COVID. Eliz was getting an award. So I think, hopefully you didn't have to get too dressed up for that and join the rest of us in our PJs at home. I think that the thing that strikes me the most as a psychologist is you're using a life story, and I'll let you tell your own story, to make the world better, not only for yourself, but for everyone else. And you're working on helping people have low stress and great success, and creating corporate culture, say that 3 times, that are immune to overwhelm and uncertainty. Well, welcome. Tell us, please, your story. Let's start with that. It's very compelling.
Oh, I am so delighted to be here. And the story, the short version is back in 2000. If we get back in the Wayback Machine and go all the way back to 2000, I was 35 years old and delighted to discover that I was pregnant. We had 5 years of infertility, and it was just miraculous that finally something worked. And we were so delighted. And then very quickly we discovered not only was I was pregnant with twins. I had about 3 good weeks. And then wild amounts of morning sickness for the first full trimester. Then again, I had 2 pretty good weeks, and then started preterm labor and was on bed rest for the rest of my pregnancy, including a full month in the hospital on bed rest, which I have to say was not within my birth plan.
No,
that was not part of the plan. But it was exactly where I needed to be. There in the hospital on a Sunday morning, where I was taking my shower. That was my reward if the labor stayed at bay, so I could have 7 contractions an hour. 6 were a problem. So as long as I had 7 or less, or is that the wrong way? No, that was the wrong way. I could have 5 contractions an hour. 6 was a problem. So as long as it was 5 or less, we were good. I could have a shower, sitting down shower. When I started to have what I thought was heartburn, and because I was enormously pregnant, I had heartburn all the time. But this was different. And I originally rang for the nurse and asked for an antacid, which was pretty much common practice. But in a very short period of time, that pain changed. I started to throw up, and I met my own eyes in the mirror and realized that something was really wrong and I needed help. Fortunately, in the hospital, got help right away. There was a flurry of activity. So most of what was necessary was in the room when my heart stopped. And again, great care right away. They were able to use the defibrillator, restart my heart. They took me to the cath lab, figured out what was wrong. And then I had an emergency cesarean to deliver the girls and open heart surgery to fix my heart. So I ended up having a C-section, triple bypass, all in a period of a very short time. I, however, had really good drugs. My husband had the worst day of his life.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was a changing day. Having twins would have been enough, but that overwhelm and uncertainty of all of that put together was a lot. But I think I was the only person who came out of that experience knowing that it was all going to be okay. Like I knew it was going to be okay, and was able to stay calm and just go through. And that was something that I knew was very special. That as long as I had those two beautiful little baby girls and my husband, I could withstand anything else. Just needed that little bubble of contentment. And that knowledge I knew was unique. I had somewhat of a vision of sharing that in a group of people, and knew that that was the mission that I was on, that I needed to share this story to help other people. And that's what I've been doing. My girls are 21 years old and they're healthy, I'm healthy, and that's the journey we've been on.
Well,
It is a remarkable story, and there are a couple of points in there that perhaps we can get to in the course of our conversation. One is, you said that it wasn't where you wanted to be, but it was where you needed to be.
Yep.
And I think that's a
Absolutely right.
mindset that we can all use when we get into those types of situations. It certainly is a theological idea, but from a psychological point of view, it can really change our whole perception. And the other thing you said is that it was your husband's birthday.
Oh yeah.
Often the people who appear to be the ones having the worst time, it's not always the case.
No.
Sometimes it's the people close to them.
I honestly, in that situation, I think it is always harder to be the caregiver.
yes.
It's always, if I get to choose, I want to be the one that has the illness or the injury or whatever. No, I want to be the caregiver, but but it's really hard to watch somebody you love go through something that there's no way that you can control it. You have nothing, that uncertainty, that overwhelm. That's the kind of stress that
And yet
we don't
he
get
was
to
your
avoid.
certainty.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though he couldn't do anything, he was the
Absolutely.
bubble of love and certainty that got you through. You said something else that I think is one of the keys to survival, especially maybe for women. Sorry, Rabbi, to exclude you on this, but I want you to feel your inner woman, all right? The whole
work on it.
idea of women denying their pain, and you said you looked in your eyes and you knew something was different, and you saved your life with the help of a team, but you initiated by noticing something was seriously different. And how many women just discount that?
Well, in particularly when it comes to heart issues for women,
Yes.
our symptoms are very different.
Yes, they are.
That doesn't mean that men can't have a heart attack and have very subtle symptoms too. They can. But generally, men will have that sort of television, grab their arm, crushing chest pain sort of symptoms. For women, it may be that heartburn feeling or just a stomach upset that you can't really explain, or like weird pain that goes up into your jaw, up your neck, that sort of thing, where it is just so subtle and it doesn't clue you in necessarily that this is my heart, but really anything from your hips to your, the bottom of your chin that is just off and you don't know why it's there. It's not, I raked leaves and now my shoulder hurts. It's my shoulder hurts and I don't know why. And it's not allowing me to do what I normally do. That's a big clue and you should get help.
It is somewhat bewildering sometimes. We all, especially as we get older, we all get these little aches and pains and things, and this isn't quite right. And, and we don't want to be hypochondriacs. And it's probably nothing. And on the other hand, if we ignore it and it turns out to be something, now we've got serious problems that could have been avoided. So, I mean, that itself, I think, produces a tremendous amount of stress that I just don't know. Is this something I should act on, or should I just give it some time and expect it to go away?
listen, I have been in the emergency room 3 times, knowing pretty significantly that what I was experiencing wasn't another heart issue.
Good.
But I still go because
Good.
it's better to be told it's GERD than end up having something real damage to your heart, which now you have to deal with, instead of being able to catch it early and have an intervention that prevents the damage.
Absolutely. One of the things that you have been so good at turning this experience into a life-saving experience for lots of individuals and huge groups of people is your stress-proof testing tool. I love the name of that. I find it hard to say. Stress-proof testing tool.
It's very chewy. Yes,
I love it. But tell me about that. I'm intrigued.
Part of what I did in the research to write my book, Stress Proof Your Life, is look at what was causing job stress for people across a wide variety of industries, internationally, men, women, all kinds of different types of jobs and job positions. And honestly, what I was looking for was to be able to quantify what work-life balance looked like for professional women. That's what I was looking for. But in order to get that, you have to test a larger data set, right? So I developed with a PhD researcher a 5-minute survey, basically, that asked people questions about how stressed they are, what are the factors that are causing that stress, what would be useful to relieve that stress, and then, of course, some demographics so we can slice it and dice that all kinds of different ways. What was surprising, when all of the data came back, the first set, about 4,000 people, when we sliced and diced it, or we looked at the big data set, only about 5% of people said something related to work-life balance was their biggest cause of stress. What most people said was overwhelm and uncertainty. And overwhelm are things like the pace of work, the amount of things you need to get done in the time allowed, short staffing, those sort of things are overwhelm. Those are things outside of our control. Work-life balance we defined as things like, my job is negatively impacting my health, or my job is impacting my relationships, or my relationships are impacting my ability to do my job. Little tiny wedge of people said that that was their top stressor. And then when we just looked at women, because I thought, oh, well, this will be different, right? Still only about 5% of women said work-life balance issues were their top stressor. And then when we looked even closer to women who have children living at home under the age of 17, it was still that little wedge, just about 5% of people. But for those people, instead of my job is negatively impacting my health, they said caring for children was their top stressor, which for some people, caring for children is very stressful. Yes. And I wish we would have asked the age of the children, because I'm pretty sure those children are either age 0 to 3 or juniors in high school, because those are some stressful years, very stressful years. But so often organizations focus their stress management tools on that work-life balance piece.
Yes.
Which leaves out 95% of the people, which is trying to solve the wrong problem, really. And if overwhelm and uncertainty, things that we absolutely cannot control, are the top stressors, we need tools in order to live and work well under the stress we can't avoid, which is how I put together the book.
I think it's brilliant. I can't wait to read it. I'm always reminded of Dante's Inferno, where the lowest level what had to do with limbo, which is uncertainty, right?
Right.
And I think that, and the rabbi wrote his book on gray, grappling with the gray. And
Yes.
again, uncertainty. So one of the issues is, I think uncertainty is that portal for a bunch of stress and a bunch of
Absolutely.
interestingly yucky experiences. And by interesting, I don't mean that it's good, you know?
No. Interestingly yucky.
Yeah,
I like that turn of phrase.
it's very sophisticated because, you know, I'm a psychologist.
And
Very.
it's trademarked as
That's
well.
right.
Yeah.
I think she should definitely trademark that. Well, you know, I talk about stress in lots of different ways. And, you know, Dr. Margarita, I'm sure you talk about this too, is that there's a natural reaction in our body
Yes.
when our brains notice a stressor in our environment. Cortisol, our stress hormone, goes up. It does all kinds of things, makes our heart beat faster, raises our blood pressure. It even makes our blood stickier. So if, for example, the stressor is, I'm going to get in a car accident right now, maybe you don't bleed to death. All of those things are great if you're about to get in a car accident. It's not great if uncertainty is constantly triggering that reaction.
Yes.
Because the car accident, if you're able to avoid it, you get that sort of weird tingly feeling after that, because that's all that cortisol leaving your body. If uncertainty or overwhelm is constantly there, that cortisol level never has a chance to come down. And none of us need a higher heart rate, higher blood pressure, or stickier blood. That's why stress is a major risk factor for heart disease. That's how those things are related.
There's a TED talk by Kelly McGonigal.
I love that one.
Yeah, and the biggest takeaway for me from that was that the thing that we're most dangerously stressed about is stress. It's not stress that's bad for us, it's the stress of being stressed.
Well, I think it's very easy for us to get acclimated to a level of stress and,
Yes.
and think that that's an okay level for us to be at. And then our bodies are super smart. That stress will eke out in ways that may surprise us. And I've been working with a group in the hospitality industry. Those people have been through the trenches, and a lot of them are still in the trenches right now.
Yes, they are.
And I've had a number of people tell me that they just don't know what's going on with them, that they're easy to cry, they're easy to be angry, they're laughing at situations where laughing seems inappropriate. And my reaction to that is, yeah, that's how your body's getting rid of the cortisol. It is going to come out in some way when something physically changes for us. It is an indication that something has changed and maybe it's time to let go of that cortisol.
Yeah.
And so if you're crying, your body is helping you out. It's not something to be ashamed of or question your sanity about. It is a reaction. And once you recognize that this is a completely natural and acceptable reaction to the crazy environment that you're in, you're dealing with things that people shouldn't have to deal with over the long term. And there can be a wide variety of symptoms of those things that we may not recognize as stress. You know, that anger, the crying, the sadness, the guilt. Oh, I am sorry.
You're needed.
That sort of thing. Well, that is my husband who will ring through when I have do not disturb on. Because that is our rule.
That is nice that he had that privilege. That's good.
Yes, he does indeed.
You tell him hi for us and thanks for sharing.
When I call him back, I will.
Right.
So anyway, the idea of paying attention to what you're experiencing and recognizing that anger, that sadness, the anxiety, sort of on edge feeling, all of that is an indication that stress has been building up and maybe you didn't notice. And it's time to take some time and really practice some skills to get that cortisol level back down to normal so you can recover from the stress you can't avoid.
So what I've been seeing in a lot of the groups with whom I've consulted or spoken So all three of us are consultants and speakers.
Mhm.
And especially in the hospitality industry, or very front-facing businesses.
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of people, especially the women, feel very ashamed that they're not managing the
Yes.
stress well.
Yes.
And instead of then, they feel guilty and ashamed, and they might be blaming, and instead of looking at awareness,
Yep.
they're just piling it up. And so I think you have a delicious solution. You came up with a series of funny things to help release cortisol. So please enlighten us.
Oh, I think you're talking about the woohoo.
Woo-woo!
Is that right?
Yeah.
Woohoo! So one of the things that we can do to signal our body that it's time to let that cortisol go is to change our focus. We are naturally designed to look for problems to solve. And especially highly capable people are constantly on the outlook for problems. But like, whoop, there's a problem, I'm going to go fix that. Whoop, and it's constant, right? Every time we notice a problem, though, that's a stressor, our cortisol goes up, which makes us focused, which allows us to solve that problem. So stress isn't the enemy here. It's not good or bad. It's just a natural reaction. If we can just for a little while take a break from looking for those problems and focus on what's possible and what's positive, it changes that focus. It signals that something's different, allows that cortisol to come down a bit. And I love the woohoo as a key to this. And the woohoo, all it is a sharing something positive with somebody else. And I'm a firm believer in celebrating all victories, no matter how small they are. Back in the day when my girls were little, it's hard to get little girls out of the house into school on time. And we were not making it, even though I am embarrassed to say we live 3 houses down from the elementary school. You would think that we could be on time more often, but the line between on time and late when you live 3 houses down from the school is pretty thin. So we were not making it until we got a little phone call from the principal and said, we would like you to be on time more often. And so we had woohoos every day when I managed to get my girls to school on time. Woohoo! Just celebrating those little things, no matter how small they are, just allows you to celebrate that little victory. And when you share it with somebody else, it allows them to share something positive with you too and celebrate. And it changes that focus from looking for the problems to something very positive.
And Rabbi, you're always about focusing on the positive.
Yeah, well, it's, something that, just the way you said that made me think that, I think we have a predisposition to turn little problems into big problems.
Yes.
And to ignore little victories altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'd be a lot healthier if we did the opposite. When you're talking about this sense of being out of control, again, certainly from a spiritual or religious point of view, I know for myself that the most difficult times for me is when I imagine I'm in control or think I should be in control, mm-hmm. when in fact I'm not, because when I recognize that I'm not in control, that can actually be quite, it could really be a source of peace. Right? There's nothing I can do about this. So why should I let myself get upset about it? Wait for something where I can actually deal with it. And then I can, use that stress response to actually find solutions.
Back to stoicism,
Yeah.
But my mother used to tease about men. I come from a Cuban background, and there's a lot of teasing about men and women. And she said, I don't tell men the truth because, they think they're in charge. We don't want them to get upset. And I just think that's very funny. I mean, she had a great relationship with my dad, and it was strictly fond teasing, but it's the truth that we all have this fantasy that we're in charge, and
absolutely.
And we're really not in so many ways. We're in charge of our response or what we do about it.
Well, and I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Which reminds me, you have your sticky note solution, which I love.
Right. I want to touch on two things though,
Okay.
before we move there.
All right.
One is for men in particular, but highly capable people, when they're used to being able to solve problems, like that's their job in a lot of their relationships, solving those problems. When you come up against one you can't solve, it is so vulnerable. And a lot of us, when we're highly capable people, don't like feeling vulnerable. And that is part of that stress of like, I don't like this. I don't feel like I'm doing a good job. I don't feel like I'm living up to the expectation of how I am in the world. And that is very uncomfortable and stressful for people. Recognizing, as the rabbi said, that this is outside of my control is helpful, but I also think finding things, even small things to control when you're going through a period of that uncertainty is very helpful. I think it's why we all cleaned out our basements and our attics when COVID started, because when things feel out of control, if you could put something in order, it feels good. It feels better. And the act is something that can reduce that stress.
And why Rabbi has headset on, because he can control noise with his happy big family in his house.
Which is beautiful.
Well,
It
yeah,
is.
it's a perfect example that, we've my entire family is here, my 4 kids, too, my son, my daughter-in-law, and our 2 grandchildren. And it's wonderful, but it's definitely not relaxing. And so there is that tension. And in some ways, I have to be conscious not to feel a little bit guilty that I'm not just exuding joy and happiness, because I'm used to having my house to myself. We're empty nesters, and we love it that way.
Right.
We love it when they come, and we love it when they leave, and that's fine. But sort of these unreasonable expectations that I should be responding differently from the way I am, that itself gets us into a destructive cycle.
Yeah, we can shoot ourselves into a crisis pretty quickly. And I want to touch on something you said in terms of being exuding with joy. And I think we do a disservice to people when we spend a lot of time talking about joy and happiness, because those are fleeting, right? We don't live in joy all of the time. We have joy periodically. I really like to focus on contentment. And if I can be content, and this is, now we're getting to the post-it exercise. If at the center of my environment, of my stress environment, because we're all stewing in a soup of, of stress out there, if I know who needs to be in my bubble of contentment, my husband, my 2 daughters, me, that's it. As long as everybody is okay, I can put my head down on my pillow at night, take a deep breath, and go to sleep in contentment that this is okay. If I know who's important, if I know who's in my bubble, I can push all of those things that I can't control to the outside and not let those things impact that bubble of contentment. And that is the process that I've used for myself, because I have a surgically repaired heart. I do not need extra stress to put on my heart. Like, I do everything I can to make sure that I get to be here for my family. So I try to keep all of those. I'm not perfect at it, but I try to keep all of those things I can't control, that stress of those things, outside and not let them impact the people who are most important to me, that bubble of contentment. And so when I work with groups on overwhelm, we do a cataloging exercise with sticky notes where you write down all of the things that you are investing your time, energy, and attention to, and look at them and discover and rate them on, is this thing enhancing that bubble of contentment, enhancing your quality of life, or is it detracting? And can you reorder your stress environment intentionally in a way that allows you to spend your time, energy, and attention on the things that enhance your life and push those things that detract to the outside.
And, this is, I think, a good opportunity. We always, this is a program about ethics, I just want to tie the subject back into ethics. And I think you've just teed it up so nicely.
Oh, good.
Because, well, we have responsibilities to other people. We have to be there for our families. We're in our careers, in our communities. And if I don't take care of myself, then I'm not going to be performing optimally to discharge my responsibilities. And if I really put myself in danger, I may not be there at all for the people who are counting on me. So while we tend to think of ethics, I like to say ethics is the discipline of recognizing and taking responsibility for the impact we have on others. But that's not just what we do publicly. Our private inner behavior is going to be projected outwards. And so these forms of self-care that we've spoken about in other programs, but what you're really describing is finding the way, exerting the discipline, becoming aware of how I can manage those elements of life that are going to impair my ability to be responsible to those who need me. That is very much an ethical mindset.
I would completely agree with you. And one of the things in the interviews with leaders for the book I discovered is so often leaders are mortgaging their own health for the good of the team, or assuming for the good of the team. But that doesn't work. As you said, if you're not taking care of yourself, eventually that comes home to roost. And also you're setting a horrible example for your people. If you're not taking your vacation, if you're not actually taking care of yourself, other people don't feel that they can do the same.
That's absolutely true. You tell a charming story about being sent home with marching orders from the hospital that you needed exercise. And you found a delightful way of doing that. Please share that story, because I think we find excuses not to do things the perfect way, but you found a way to do it your fun way.
Yeah. So there's kind of two prongs to that. The first one is we very rarely do anything because we've been told to do it or we have the information on it. We don't. And you would think having a heart attack at age 35 would have turned me into the biggest workout queen in the world. I mean, I told you I have a damaged heart. And I was sent home from cardiac rehab with the instructions that I needed to do 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise every day to make everything heal. So you would have thought that would be enough, but it wasn't, because, well, I was about to say I had babies, I was recovering, I was tired. Really, I just plain didn't want to. And I had a bike on a stand in the family room that I was supposed to get on for 30 minutes a day. And I absolutely wildly hated that bike. I didn't want to do it, and I didn't do it. And in fact, I didn't do it until my husband sat me down one day and he said, I see what you're doing. And more importantly, I see what you're not doing. You're not doing the work to get better. And I had all the excuses, but he said, that doesn't matter. None of those things matter. If you don't do the work, you're not going to be here. And if you're not here, our family doesn't exist. And in that moment, I saw all the things that I didn't want to miss with my children. I want to see those little girls grow up and go off to school. I want to be their Girl Scout leader. It was amazing to watch them graduate from high school. I did not cry when we dropped them off at their individual dorm rooms, at their individual universities in front of them. But, they're amazing young women, and I can't wait to see what they do next. But I know for sure, if I don't do the work, I'm not going to get there. I'm not going to see them get married. I'm not going to see our grandchildren come into our family. So I have to do the work. it's those moments that make it possible for me to get on the stupid bike or not eat fried chicken at every meal, even though I really love it. It's the reason to do the work. It's those moments that you don't want to miss that makes it possible. So I often tell people I work with that you need an I will because statement. I will get on the stupid bike because I would really like to meet my grandchildren in the future, sometime after they get married and all of that. But that combination makes a difference. And then you're right. It isn't always about getting on the stupid bike. Sometimes it's about spending 30 minutes dancing around your kitchen or actually dancing while you're brushing your teeth. I can't tell you how many people tell me after they've seen me, oh, now I brush my teeth by, wiggling my hips and just being active for that 2 minutes. Every minute counts. If you can get, 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there and 10 minutes another time, that counts. If you can get 10,000 steps in a day, that counts. It's just about meeting the goal and knowing why it's important.
And doing it your own way.
And absolutely doing it your own way.
That was very powerful of your husband to step up in a non-blamey way, telling you,
Yep.
Hey, I think that the rabbi talks a lot about everyone's responsibility in an ethical dilemma. And then I talk about communication. How do you bring it up without making it worse? How do you bring it up in such a way that is inspiring or gets the person to notice something differently? It's a hard thing to do. Rabbi, what do you think about that? The witness's responsibility to help us all.
I think you framed it perfectly, Doctor. And I know it's something that I'm challenged. I have been challenged by for a very long time. It's easy to recognize when things are wrong. We're all very good at that. And it's easy to point out to someone why they're wrong. But what should I be wanting to do? And I've mentioned this a number of times, and I'm sure I will again, because I find it so powerful that in Hebrew, there's a biblical commandment to rebuke our fellow human beings. But the word for rebuke in Hebrew shares its root with the word that means to validate. Because when I am rebuking you, what I'm really saying is, I believe in your capacity to do better. And if I can frame it that way, the timing, pick the right moment, do it in private. Let it be clear that this is not coming from my place of power or criticism, but from my genuine concern and my genuine desire that we should all do better for the sake of ourselves and for each other. Then what I'm really doing is I'm validating you. I'm saying I believe in you and your capacity to improve. And if I can communicate that with my timing and my words and my tone of voice, and I'm genuinely sincere, because people will see through it if it's fake, right? Then it really, there's nothing that is confrontational. There's nothing that's demeaning, just the opposite.
Right. Well, interesting that you're talking about validation. One of my daughters is a psychology major looking to apply to grad school to become a psychologist, Dr. Margarita.
Well, good. If she needs any input, I'm never short an opinion.
We may need to talk offline about that.
Yes.
But on her driving her back for spring break, we spent that entire trip talking about validation.
Oh,
I know it's amazing when your kids get smarter than you, right? Like it's really
we hope
interesting.
it gets there, and we're so proud. But at the same time, we go, whoops, we get that
Right.
Scooby-Doo look. What happened?
Right. So just talking about, I spend a lot of my time when I'm working with a client and talking to leaders, validating. Now I have the name for what I do, validating that what they're experiencing is a completely reasonable reaction to the situation that they're in. And there is value to that just being told what you're doing, how you're reacting isn't wrong. When you validate somebody and say, like, I understand what's happening here, and I would like to help you see a different way. That's the right combination. So my husband did absolutely validate that he understood my struggle, helped me see a different way, and the magic that I don't always share, put in a reward system.
Oh, are we allowed to know the reward?
Yes. So he said if I could, because, you know, he was helping me develop a habit. If I could get on the stupid bike 100 days in a row, he would buy me anything I wanted.
Ooh.
And it really was something that shifted my ability, because now I know I can do it. It's not a question about whether I can get on the stupid bike or do whatever I need to do, my Pilates in the basement or a daily walk, whatever it is, I know I can. Now it's whether I choose. And that's an entirely different thing. And having a reward for making the choice does help.
Oh, and it's so powerful, because even when we want to do things, you know, I heard a rabbi say something from his rabbi that I think is absolute genius. He said, you will never have any shortage of legitimate excuses for not doing what you ought to be doing. And that word legitimate, you know, it's so important, because we think of excuses as, you know, we're making stuff up, we're making up reasons. No, they might be real, legitimate, honest to goodness reasons why this is difficult, but that doesn't have to be an impediment. And sometimes just the counterweight. We need something on the other side of the scale to give us a little more oomph to exercise our free will. And when my father, you know, my parents, you know, they were born a long time ago, and you know, during the age when everybody was smoking, and my father decided he wanted us to quit, and so he made a deal with a friend that they would stop smoking. Whichever one smoked first would have to pay the other one. I think it was $100.
Ooh.
Which in the 50s was, you know, not an insubstantial amount of money.
Yeah.
And he said he used to have dreams that he was smoking. He'd wake up, he wasn't sure, and he actually lost the bet or not. And then when he married my mother, who was still smoking, she was a secretary, and that's what they all did. And he said, I'll pay you, and I forget what he paid her. And he actually gave her the money. And he said, I'm paying you this to stop smoking. If you smoke, you have to give it back. And you know, we want to do things. Sometimes we just need a little bit of help, and if we look for ways of helping each other, that's really effective, really powerful.
Yeah, and it's not so much about the money or the thing you buy. It's kind of about winning, about the other person being proud of us meeting a goal. It's very exciting to have it that way.
Yeah, well, it's that victory, right?
It is.
And we so often in our busy, stressed lives don't stop to actually celebrate the victory.
Well, it's about time for the word of the day from the rabbi. But I'm going to do something out of order, Rabbi, if you don't mind, because it seems, I know how unusual for me to break a rule.
Order in the podcast. Order in the podcast.
Eliz, here's my question. What's the next adventure for you?
That's a really interesting question.
Well, thank you. The rabbi and I came up with that.
The next adventure,
yes, ma'am,
is I have been privileged to work with organizations who really value their people, but who are also under a remarkable amount of pressure they can't influence outside of their control. And every time I go into a new organization, it's an adventure, because they never quite know what we're going to uncover. And that's a pretty new adventure to me since the book has been out now, as the world is opening more. And I am enjoying this adventure so much. I love learning about what people do at work and how organizations are functioning or not functioning. And that adventure has been a delight.
Well, we're going to push you. How about an adventure that's personal?
A personal adventure.
I dare to ask.
Wow. You know, what's interesting is that I think having a second chance at life at age 35, I don't have a bucket list because we just tend to do those things.
That's profound.
I'm living the adventure every day.
And
It's
you're
nice to
doing with
hear.
such elegance. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
it's nice-
Rabbi.
No, it's nice to hear because what is so common is that when we do have these sort of life-changing events, and we do have that momentary feeling of I'm going to make the most of what I have left, and then a few weeks go by, and we end up right back in the same rut. And that you were able to take that and really use it to transform your worldview and your mindset. It's impressive, and it's an inspiration to all of us, I think.
It was definitely a gift. I often say that I was given the gift of a heart attack at age 35. And it's a gift that I feel compelled to share.
And that's the Stoic attitude that we keep bumping into, Rabbi, that things aren't good or bad. It's amor fati, love of fate, and facing it graciously.
Yeah, and somebody pointed out to me recently that the word responsibility is built on the word response, which I had never thought of before. Right? It's the way we respond that determines whether we are responsible people.
And good, Rabbi, is there a word of the day?
There is, and I was debating between a couple, but your bicycle story, Eliz, made me think that I choose the phrase of the day, which is averted vision. Averted vision. It's a term that was coined by Aristotle, because the way our eyes are designed, we have cones in the center of the eye that make out sharp, clear shapes in front of us. And then we have rods that are responsible for our peripheral vision. And it's very common that we can look right at something and not see it because it's in competition with sharper images that your cones are designed to pick out. But just because it's not clear and well-defined doesn't mean it's not important. And so sometimes you have to look away a little bit in order to see something clearly. We have those out of the corner of our eye experiences, moments. And it's not just a psychological thing, it's actually a physiological phenomenon. And so when you were looking straight at that bicycle, all you could see was the bicycle, and it was you against the bicycle. Right? But on the periphery, there were the future events, the daughter's graduation down the line somewhere, the family events, the good health and everything that brings with it. We have to train ourselves not to be overly focused on what's right in front of us, but to use that averted vision to see out of the corner of our eyes, literally and figuratively, so that we can keep track of those elements that are easy to miss if we don't train ourselves and discipline ourselves to pay attention to.
Liz, see what you inspired? Good choice, Rabbi.
That was good. I'm glad this is recorded.
I like that. Yeah, he's pithy. So how about then some final words of wisdom from you, Eliz? We've got people wanting to do better. You have all sorts of secrets. What do you say to them?
Be kind to yourself. One of the things that I say to myself every day, sometimes several times a day, is life is not about perfection. It's about moving in the right direction. And there are days all of us take a little step off the path. It's getting back on the path that matters.
And that, of course, is so fundamental to ethics, that it's
Mhm.
okay if we make mistakes, because we're human
Mhm.
beings, and that's what we do. That's our condition. It's what we do after we make those mistakes. Do we take
Absolutely right.
responsibility for ourselves? Do we own up to whatever damage we
Mhm.
might have caused? And do we make a plan for the future that we won't keep repeating them again and again and again? And your message is one that's particularly powerful for helping us develop that sense of vision and self-responsibility. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah,
Oh
thank
my
you.
gosh, my pleasure.
It was truly wonderful. And I think that you're helping lots of people, including us today. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Doctor, what's the last word?
Last word of the day is I don't think I can be kind to yourselves. I like that, Eliz. Be kind to yourselves. A lot of the stress that we face has to do with expectations of who we're supposed to be, not who we really are. What life we should be having, rather than what life is in front of us or what life makes sense for us. And I think having the courage, and this is where ethics come in, right, Rabbi, the courage to really look at our lives and what is it that is our main value and our main goal, and focus on that. And making sure that we count the victories and include people in our journey, because we're never alone. At least we don't have to be. So that's all I have to say about that. So this has been the Rabbi and the Shrink, and we've had the pleasure of having with us Eliz Greene, and of course, our favorite rabbi. Thank you all, and we'll see you at the next episode. In the meantime, be kind to yourselves.
Thank you for listening to the Rabbi and the Shrink, Everyday Ethics Unscripted. To book Dr. Red Shoe, Dr. Margarita Gurri, or Rabbi Yonason Goldson as speakers or advisors for your organization, contact them at therabbiandtheshrink.com. This has been a Dr. Red Shoe production.